Welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for attending. We certainly appreciate your attendance today. My name is Don Pearson. I'm serving as your moderator, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Inductive Automation Software. And today we're going to talk about 5 control system gifts that keep on giving. As we look to the reason why we decided to do that, is that sort of this time of year, it's the end of the year, maybe time to talk about looking forward to next year, and offer some strong reasons why Ignition can help your company thrive in the new year and really for years to come. Actually, we get asked quite often about what's the value of Ignition that can be brought to a person's company, and also we get asked, how can I communicate that inside the organization? Sometimes one person finds out about Ignition, they get interested, but they have to go inside the organization and communicate to others about where that might fit. So today we've actually assembled a panel of industry experts to discuss what we're calling 5 gifts in keeping with the holiday theme that Ignition can give your control system and it will boost your company's bottom line. Brief background on inductive automation. We started in 2003. Steve Heckman is our CEO, our president, and our founder. He just really basically was an integrator who thought there had to be a better way to get things done in this industry. And now we're 10 years down the road, and software is being applied successfully in a wide variety of industries, actually, from oil and gas, water, wastewater, manufacturing, automotive, food and beverage, and a lot more. We actually have installations in over 70 countries worldwide, and we have integrators working in over 60 countries. Basically, what Ignition is everything you could possibly need in one powerful integrated software solution. It leverages trusted IT standards, cutting-edge web technologies, and allows you to create a unified software solution to fulfill the full range of your needs from SCADA, HMI, and MES application needs, whether the company is big or small. Very often we get asked to look at ROI. If I'm going to invest in something, what's going to be my return on investment? It's kind of a big buzzword in business today. And just a slide or two on what it means. I'm sure many of you, if not most or all of you, do understand it. It's really just a measurement that helps you evaluate investments. And the gains that you get are really in the form of what savings in time and money from an old solution, as well as increases in efficiency and costs that are included in the price of the software you have to figure in, as well as the implementation of that software. So to calculate ROI, which is the benefit of return on an investment, divided by the cost of the investment. So you basically take it, express it in a percentage or a ratio. The higher the percentage, the better the ROI. A simple example is, let's say a company will get $60,000 over the course of 3 years if they switch to a new SCADA software. The investment in new software over that period will be 20 grand. When you subtract the investment from the gain and divide that by the investment, by that total cost of the investment, you get the ROI. In this case, would be a couple 100%. This means that if the company switched to the new SCADA system software, they would gain $2 for every one they invested over that 3-year period of the ROI. So let's talk about how to make this ROI formula work when you're talking about SCADA software. You have a lot of things to consider when you're investing. There's certainly the price of the software itself. There's the price of supporting the software. There's the price of any OS upgrade you may have to do. You have to consider the price of licensing, the price of installation. So there's, when you look at all these prices, additional software, training, client licenses, installations that need to be factored in, and not to mention what kind of cost is involved in development time. These are all things that you have to figure in when you're looking at what's going to be my investment in a new piece of software. On the gain side, from investing in a SCADA software solution, a lot of factors. Some of the big ones to consider are the money saved on the software costs, support contracts, client licenses, quicker development, and easy installation are all things you need to factor in. And you also need to obviously take a look at improvements in functionality and efficiencies that can be helpful in increasing productivity and eliminating waste in your organization. So today's agenda is going to talk about the big gains that Ignition can give your company. We're going to go into 5 gains, and I'm really pleased with our expert panelists to help give their perspective on that today. The gains being unlimited licensing, web-based architecture, rapid application development, SQL database driven, and of course increased production efficiency. And you can think of these gains as things that your company will benefit from year after year. Also, at the end of today's agenda, we've left a pretty good chunk of time for your questions. We already have some questions in the queue. But if you're not familiar with our console, just look for the question tab in the console. You can type questions throughout the presentation. If you happen to want to have a particular panelist answer your question, then by all means, you can name the panelist that you would like to address the question, and I'll address it to that person. Basically, we don't want to have you have to guess about which SCADA investment is best for your company. We want to give you solid, concrete reasons to choose Ignition, not just for yourself, because I happen to know many of the attendees today are interested in how they can present Ignition inside their companies to gain support for it, because they already know that it's a solution in a direction they want to go. Today, we've assembled a panel of Ignition users to share their expert opinion and of how Ignition has helped their company gain a solid return on investment. In many cases, Ignition will pay for itself within the first year. We're going to talk about some of those ways, if you will, that Ignition can do that. The panelists today are Henry Palecek, Information and Process Control Supervisor at a major California water district; Ted Krevis, Manager of Industrial Applications at Sherwin-Williams; Jason Koop, Director of Research and Development at Schnitzer Steel; and Tom Heckman, MES Product Manager at Inductive Automation. So let's go into the first one of these, gifts or gains. With unlimited licensing Ignition, you basically, you can use it as much as you want and not have any attention on any additional cost. It's a huge cost saving and also has a major impact in terms of freeing up your attention for innovation. Let's just take a quick look at how maybe a more traditional SCADA software licensing model may work for your software. First off, you'll be charged for every individual client you use and for special components to connect to things like the PLCs and operator interface terminals. Next, on top of that, if you want to connect to Historian or Enterprise or any ERP system, there would be additional costs for that. Next, if you want to make changes to your HMI, that can be additional licensing costs to do that. And if you think about any upgrades that you may need or looking at even more cost over a large system, these costs can actually, we certainly hear from our customers, can be staggering. And this entire licensing model is all about, unfortunately, it puts the customer in a mindset of feeling limited. And I've sat with customers that are talking about thinking about whether they want to do a project, and they're concerned about whether they're going to go over their next tier of tag count and what they're going to have to pay if they increase the tags. If you're innovating a system, if you're creating a solution, it's certainly our view that you should be free to innovate and create without attention on that aspect of it. So really, that's one reason why Ignition from the very start, Steve was committed to it being an unlimited licensing, which means unlimited potential for you as the integrator or end user. And it really gives you whatever, clients, screens, tags, connections, devices, whatever you need, one affordable price, and you can build any type of HMI, SCADA, or database application. So not putting any limitation on the licensing also frees you up to have unlimited scalability, and think of what kind of savings that can be when you start extrapolating that over large system implementations. So with that, just as a background of that particular gift or approach, Henry Palecek is really, he's a featured panelist today. He's been using Ignition for some time. He has a lot of experience of how Ignition has changed things where he works. So Henry, I'm going to bring you in at this point, and just an opening question would be, after your initial Ignition install, how easy has it been to expand and update your existing control system with Ignition? Henry?
Well, thank you, Don. The licensing of the software allows for more than one designer session, which was something that wasn't possible with our old legacy system. On several occasions, we had all three of the INC staff working building SCADA screens concurrently. If we were doing a more complex task, I would take and open up a designer session, create the tags, and one of the techs that worked for me would build the screens, and so we could build the screens concurrently. It made the deployment go a lot faster. And it would give us an immediate double check, because as I'm building the screens and he would be creating the screens, we would see that everything looks right. The screen that you see here is an example of where we were petitioning or bringing up a new piece of equipment. It's a dry polymer feed system, It was actually fairly complex, and so what I was able to do was there in the background set up a temporary designer session because I had access to the network, and I could pull up the PLC ladder on the other. And as the electricians and the mechanics were making sure that the piece of equipment was working properly, I'm in Designer actually creating the screen on the fly. This made the startup of this particular piece of equipment run much, much faster than it would have been, had I been, doing a development session, in my office or somewhere, away from the piece of equipment. Here I'm physically right next to the equipment, just 5 feet away. So the software actually, worked out quite nice. It made the startup of this piece of equipment much easier.
Thanks, Henry. Appreciate that. So let's take a look at the next question, and of saving over time, I guess I would say. In your opinion, has Ignition paid for itself over time?
So the public agencies are under a lot of pressure to control costs. And so when you're looking at like the cost of an annual support contract, it can be quite expensive. In addition, if your SCADA software doesn't have a good data historian, you maybe are paying a programmer to create customized reports. So that's exactly what we had done. Our legacy SCADA system didn't have an internal SQL database. So back in 2000, we set up a SQL database on the side and had a one-page report created by a consultant. And you can see there over the course of a 6-year period, we paid $30,000 to have this one-page report created. When I moved to Ignition, I was able to store the data in a SQL database and do just simple queries against that database to get my peak flow and my daily averages. So no longer, am I strapped to this type of a consultant type thing, building me custom reports. The software is powerful enough that I can do that work on my own through the SCADA system. And so there I've got a $30,000 savings. So that's kind of a nice feature too. I think we were looking at the total costs of everything that I've spent since 2007, including the 2 primary systems and a 3rd standalone system, training and comprehensive support, and it was less than what I paid for the Wonderware system back in fiscal 97, 98. So, and that's significant, especially if you consider the time value of money.
Yeah, Henry, thanks. So I'm going to interject a question because Kathy Kesey asked a couple of questions directed at you. So first was, I think he answered when you said 2007, Kathy. I think he meant that answer. But how long has Henry been using Ignition? Can you answer that question real quickly, Henry?
Yeah, since August of 2007, we started with the factory SQL product and then migrated a little bit later to PMI and then jumped on Ignition as soon as it became available.
Good. And then I know we're going to get to this later, but maybe a quick answer, so I'm just trying to respond to Kathy. Henry's experience on applying Ignition upgrades as they come out. How are you doing at applying upgrades for Ignition as they come out?
The Ignition upgrades are pretty easily done. I remember when we first purchased it, we had a standalone system before we paired for high availability, and an update came out, and I got it on the drive, and I put it in the machine, and the system, I double click on it, and it says, got to stop the service to install the upgrade. I say okay. It basically took about 60 seconds to copy the file and about 60 seconds to restart the service. All of the screens in the front control room flashed and reloaded, and I had done a complete Ignition upgrade in like less than 2 minutes. It was quite an amazing thing. I've never seen a piece of software that upgrades so easily.
Thanks, Henry, for taking a little interjection of questions. I do want to encourage people to ask questions, so I'm going to get to as many as we can at the end, and if I can, I'll interject them like this as we go along. But another overall question for you, Henry, how has your SCADA budget been affected by Ignition? I know you sent us this chart, and we put it in here, so give us that perspective.
So what you can kind of see there is the SCADA budget was kind of increasing at a rate going up towards 2007. So 2007 was when we deployed the Ignition solution, and you can see that the budget's been fairly flat ever since. And the significance of this is we deployed Ignition in a pay-as-you-go fashion where there was no capital funding. So I've basically not used any capital funding on my SCADA system since 2007 and been able to deploy a high availability architecture and a standalone system just using my annual SCADA budget.
Thanks. I totally appreciate those comments. Let's move on to web-based architecture, talking about gain number 2. Any company that uses automation software certainly can appreciate faster ways to deploy clients and update and maintain their automated control system. Because less time spent on changing out HMA panel screens, SCADA applications, or executive dashboards, and it's more savings over the years. Just even the example Henry just gave of an upgrade in a couple of minutes. Compare that to some experiences in terms of upgrade, it's significantly different. The web-based architecture has some major advantages that can save your company a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of headaches. Ignition server-centric. That means you install it once on a server and launch as many clients as you need to any machine equipped with a web browser. This makes projects much easier to update, to maintain, because changes can be made in one location and they're updated everywhere. Additionally, Ignition is built on a solid foundation of cross-platform Java. This makes it impossible, or this makes it very possible, I should say, for Ignition to be installed on any major operating system. So you can use Ignition in whatever software environment you have. And I know in terms of many of those attending and people we've had conversations throughout this year, understanding these is something that I think is important when we're trying to look at explaining inside an organization why Ignition is the right solution for your organization. So I'm bringing Henry back and talk about how Ignition's web-based architecture benefited his organization. How did it help the water district? And Henry, how has Ignition's web-based nature eased the installment and updating process for you? And what kind of difference did that make for your company? I think I interjected Kathy's question to take away your thunder on this one, but you can summarize it and add anything you want to it, Henry.
Okay, thanks. So the software has really great flexibility in terms of interfacing to operating systems, databases, and OPC servers. With legacy systems, it wasn't this way. Something as simple as a Windows Service Pack would force a SCADA upgrade. In our case, we've moved from XP 32-bit to Windows 64-bit technology, and it's no real issues have come up. Now with Windows 8 coming out, I think maybe now might be a time to do Linux with the cross-platform capability. During the course of the time, I've actually done 4 database migrations and updates, and I simply set up the new server, create the login group, use the database tools built in with the database provider to import the old data in. I log to both systems for a while, and then when I'm happy with the results, I retire the old server. So once again, the flexibility of Ignition has allowed me to upgrade the database without forcing a SCADA upgrade. Although I do keep the Ignition up to date, it's nice to have that flexibility. Finally, the Java, it hides the underlying software, so issues of like Windows patches and virus updates don't break an Ignition system. This is a problem for legacy systems, and so in our case, we've been able to keep our Java up to date. I think when we originally started, we were somewhere around Java 5 update 14, and now we're up to Java 7 update 9, and it's just working really well. So if I kind of had to summarize it, I think what we've seen is lower software costs. We've been able to do faster deployment, and I have less headaches and hassles because of the unique design of the Ignition software.
Thanks,
the screen
Henry,
that
I took this last slide up here that you gave us if you wanted to comment any further, because I know you've covered probably that. Anything else on Ignition and how you use it to make updates in your system? Anything you want to comment on this slide here?
Sure. So this is an example of the rapid deployment and less headaches and hassles. So you can see on the one side there the tag data, the information is coming in for both analogs and digitals. When those tags are dropped onto the bar graph immediately goes active. So that's a good example of an active screen builder. They've got a nice find and replace feature. This is a flow control facility where we're moving from a serial radio to an Ethernet radio, and so the tag names have to be changed a little bit. So what I'm able to do is with the find and replace, with just a few mouse clicks, I'm able to modify, in this case, 57 tags and able to do it within less than 15 seconds. So it's a real nice feature that allows quick, rapid deployment and expansion of your system.
Thanks, Henry. Appreciate all the detail on some of those features. Thanks. Let's go on to gain number 3, rapid application development. Some projects that you really want to have done, they may be just too time-consuming, too time-intensive to think about completing them. Ignition was designed to really let you make changes on the fly, build projects quickly and efficiently, which means if you want something done, you can get it done in hours. You're not talking about, days or weeks. So a couple of points on that. Ignition has an object-oriented development environment, rich component libraries and data binding functionality to make it simple to create powerful and dynamic HMI SCADA projects. And they can be customized to whatever need you have. So Ignition empowers you with all of the tools that you will need to turn your HMI SCADA visions into a reality for you. And it frees you up from doing repetitive development tasks so you can spend more time innovating new project features and less time on the repetitive stuff. One of the biggest killers of project times, the project takes too long to finish, then the project often gets left behind as other priorities come in and it's just lost. So to get a project done effectively and to make the changes you need to have to be done, they have to be done in real time, which is what Ignition lets you do. It also allows multiple people to develop the same project at the same time, and this allows you to really multiply your development efforts so you can turn ideas a lot more quickly into reality. So with that, I think I want to ask Tom Heckman, who's our MES product manager who works a lot with these tools and these features, and turn it over to you for a few minutes, Tom. And I guess the general question would be, Tom, what are some of the features of Ignition that make rapid development possible, and what kind of time can you save as you use it?
Sure. I'll start out just talking about component templates. You can dramatically reduce the downtime with component templates. So instead of having to edit every little, like if you have a tank like we have on the slide there and you want to make changes to it, you have to make that change, 5, 6, however many times, maybe many more in many projects. You can now use a template, and you can make one change to a master component template, and the changes will automatically be reflected to every instance of a component throughout the project. Along with that, we have user-defined data types, so or UDTs, and their function as a powerful template for data structure. So where component templates are graphical, these are your data structure. So instead of having the repetitive tasks of every individual tag and copy and paste and go in and change the settings for it and such, you can now define groups of tags and quickly create instances of those groups of tags. And that reduces a lot of development time of just data entry and typing and typos and everything associated with that. Then we also have project templates, and they're great to jumpstart a project. They set up the initial navigation and screen look and feel. From there, you can go ahead and modify them. So these development tools, along with many others that are in Ignition, can save you a lot of time and money, when developing and maintaining your HMI, SCADA, and MES projects.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, much appreciated. So let's move on to SQL database driven, and this is gain number 4. Data is just really the lifeblood of modern manufacturing companies, and the preferred way to handle data today, of course, is with SQL databases. Unlike many other automation software packages, Ignition fully leverages the power of SQL databases to deliver easy connections and powerful functionality to you. Ignition combined with SQL can actually make the existing data in your control system more usable and more valuable for the entire enterprise. It uses SQL for a variety of ways to store historical data in a user-friendly format, easy for other enterprise systems, as I mentioned, to read, so that data is more useful for everyone in your organization. It uses the power of SQL to run a full range of business applications and manufacturing processes, such as recipe and batch management, so you can do more with the data that you do have. And Ignition can also use SQL to build just about any application you can think of. This can give you the freedom to innovate new solutions to help your help your business thrive. And let me just say that I'm really pleased to have Ted Crevis with us. He's a manager of industrial applications at Sherwin-Williams. Ted has had a lot of experience using SQL with Ignition. So Ted, with this, I'm going to throw the first question over to you, is how has combining the use of Ignition with SQL database increased the value of the control system data where you work?
Sure. Thanks, Don. Well, once factory floor equipment data is combined with business data, you hand over to your enterprise powerful analytics in a format the business understands. Logging equipment sensory data elements in a time series fashion may help an engineer who wrote a PLC program, but your operations personnel won't be able to make sense of it. But if you include business data elements to that data, such as order number or SKU, data elements the business deals with every day, you hand over to the business community imperative data in the context they understand. Operations will say, this machine always runs at half speed when this product is run, something like that. That adds value. Now, Ignition provides multiple options for combining and storing this information, as well as giving visibility to the stored data elements. These options will make your engineering and IT personnel more effective, yet keeping costs down. Ignition does not use a proprietary database, so using their JDBC driver, we connect to existing databases to collect the business data elements, and then we combine them with the PLC information from the factory floor. We then store the new Ignition-generated data in an existing underutilized database. We save both money and time by repurposing existing infrastructure, which is free to the company, and move the new application forward by not having to create new business processes to obtain the data. We're doing it with what the operator does today. Another example would be to make old applications more effective by combining factory floor data to them. You can create new interfaces between your legacy business systems and the new factory data you are storing. Something as basic as like the weight of a vessel or temperature of the product could prove invaluable to an existing lab system or order management system. Do you have any other questions for me?
Yeah, I want to give you a chance to maybe expand. Thanks for that answer. To expand a little bit more on what value has Ignition added to your company, and how has that made a difference in overall? And I know you hit several of those points, but maybe you can hit on a couple of more that I think you want us to put on this slide that I just threw up there. So go ahead with that, Ted.
Sure. We focused on business analytics and using the data storage capability of Ignition. This will give visibility to key performance metrics that have helped our major continuous improvement projects at our facilities. Here's an example. Using the Modbus driver, we record information from packaging scales that display uptime and the amount of product packaged. From this single data element, married up with business orders, we can determine run rates by machine, by order, by operator, by shift, etc. These are business analytics that help us know how we are performing. On another note, code deployment using the web link minimizes IT deployment time and complexity. We actually use a wiki page, and on the wiki page we have the various links to our different applications. Given credentials, a new user can be using the application in minutes anywhere in the enterprise. It's very powerful. Some of the future projects we're looking at is SCADA capabilities of Ignition using UDTs and template graphics like Tom Heckman just mentioned.
Great, thanks, Ted. Listen, just since we're kind of doing a little bit of an ROI thrust on this too, in your opinion, how has Ignition paid for itself, or what ROI has it given to you over time? And we put a couple bullet points up here that you had mentioned to us, but what's your answer to that question?
Sure. Well, it's without a doubt that Ignition has paid for itself. The new analytics with high visibility to the entire enterprise, unlimited clients allow us to expand our application deployment and grow without additional costs. all our costs are up front. And I'll say that again. All our IT costs are up front. How many other software companies can say that? The licensing model even allows us to absorb legacy systems that need costly upgrades. Old applications that were controls and IT islands can be put on new multi-purpose Ignition servers, saving us the costly upgrades and system maintenance on those legacy systems. Then you look into the benefit to the IT department. In all aspects of an IT project, Ignition provides the low-cost, high-quality option. Code deployment, code maintenance, the backups and upgrades, code reusability, those UDTs and template graphics Tom was talking about. Multiple options for connecting to existing systems. Ignition has the JDBC Connect, allows for JDBC connections to our databases. That allows us to use the transaction groups in Ignition, Python scripting in Ignition, and the Vision clients. Ignition helps to remove all those aspects of a project that bog down the IT rollout.
Thanks, Ted. I really appreciate you taking time to elaborate on that. We're gonna move on to increased production efficiency, number 5 of our gains, because many companies are bleeding profits or leaking profits, if you will, and they don't even know it. And every minute lost in a production line can be very costly. So really, giving your facility the gift of more uptime will be the perfect gift for any facility that's using any kind of an automated process. Small problems that cause unplanned downtime to your production lines, such as machine being set to the wrong speeds or not working properly, these things can cause small downtime events that can quickly add up to big loss over time. So whether it's improper scheduled maintenance and employee errors, they can also rob companies of a lot of productivity. So tracking downtime by hand with clipboards and other manual devices is often too slow. It results in problems being discovered only after they've already happened and the damage is already done. So OEE, if you will, or overall equipment effectiveness, is a critical measure for your overall productivity of your organization. The downtime OEE module was created to help companies track their OEE and reduce downtime events and increase efficiency by that method. So let's bring in the person who actually leads the development of the Ignition downtime OEE software, Tom Heckman. And Tom, can you tell us a little about what the Ignition downtime OEE module is and what it can do?
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about
we've been talking about Ignition, and it takes advantage of the features of Ignition. So all the database connectivity and all that is with there. You can also take that and then expand on that with the OE downtime module. And it will track your downtime and your performance and data. And you use it to identify and look for correlations that affect your efficiencies, or where you have, it could be mechanical or it could even be operational efficiencies, and it helps identify those so that you can improve those.
Great, thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. So, but I also want to go to another panelist now and get another perspective on that. And this is Jason Koo. Jason is the Director of Research and Development at Schnitzer Steel, and he has a good deal of first-hand experience in using Ignition to increase efficiencies where he works. So I got a couple, 3 questions for you, Jason. Let's just start with the first one here. How have you used Ignition to improve efficiencies at your company, at your organization?
Okay, thanks, Don. I think it's probably best if I give a quick background in terms of the company and what we're doing with Ignition. We're probably one of the newer users. We actually started a project in February of this year implementing the Ignition framework, and our business is scrap metal recycling. Before we had Ignition, I mean, we had the luxury that we didn't have a legacy system that we were going to replace, and we were looking for a solution for availability. We want to be able to track our downtime and be able to do analysis and output production. So we did an evaluation, and not to go into details, but we just came out with, for a lot of the reasons that you've gone through, this made sense to go with the Ignition platform. So we implemented it, and what we were replacing at the time was spreadsheets. Spreadsheets and clipboards is really what we did for our production. On the financial side of the business, we've got the ERP systems, we've got the major finance and inventory, but for the actual day-to-day production numbers, everything was radio, to be written down on a piece of paper, to be handed to a manager, to be written and implemented or input into a spreadsheet. So we took the Ignition platform, we implemented OEE to do our downtime analysis and collect that data in real time. We use the SPC for our process quality. We purchase scrap and then we sell scrap. So product quality has an aspect, but what is more important to us is process quality. How good is our process in terms of recovering and maximizing the recovery of the metals? What we were able to do with the OE and the SPC in particular is we had for the first time the ability to integrate production data, how much we're producing, with our sampling data, how much is going to the landfill, how much is, what are the quality of our products, what is our recovery efficiencies. We were then also able to leverage the OPC that came as part of the package. We had the sensor sorter equipment that has an OPC interface, it has OPC servers sitting on it, and whereas before that equipment would use these very, very expensive induction sensors to detect metals and then eject as the targeting system, we could actually tap into it. So now we can actually see in real time how much metal we're seeing in our in-feed material. That gave us an idea of how much metals we should expect to be recovering if the process is working correctly. So it gave us a huge, it gave us a significant view of really what was happening in our process. Whereas before, you know, our recoveries could have been dependent on what sort of material we were actually processing. So our project was to do the OEE and SPC. We got the OPC in for free, fantastic. What we also got was the ability to redevelop our HMIs, because our existing HMIs basically sat by themselves. They weren't integrated into any other system, and it was just there to start and stop. Well, because we're in here and we've got this platform, we replaced all of our HMIs, and that allowed us to take advantage of a process historian, so that when a piece of equipment, you know, faulted out a conveyor belt, the technician who would go over could go over and straight away see what just happened in the last 5 minutes. That was never possible before. You come along, they're trying to figure out what happened. We could see there was a spike. Was it a plug up? You know, basically what caused the failure. We were also able to connect to other data sources so that we could actually bring a lot of information about the production line directly to the operators and the maintenance technicians over there. So if I look at the, and the question really was about, you know, what has it done to improve efficiencies? The time, it's now given us time throughout the organization and in production to actually analyze the data, whereas before we would spend so much time collecting data, inputting data into various spreadsheets or other production systems. The data is already going in. The sampling person doesn't put it in a spreadsheet on a piece of paper. She enters it directly into SPC. Production data is entered directly in through the OEE. So you can come up with a dashboard every day and say, how did I do last night? How did I do in the last shift? How does that trend across the last month compared to the year before? How does it compare between night shift and day shift? We're now able to do these what-if analysis. So production, based on the fact that we've given them a tool and we've given them data, they've really started to change things. They hired in process engineers, which was kind of a bit of a challenge before in say in a scrapyard, you know, when you don't have the tools. But now we've got SPC tools. We can attract a greater skill set of people, and they have quality meetings to say, this is what we ran, this is how much we produced, this was the quality of our process. Do we see issues? What was it? Was it the speed? Was it the moisture content of material? Was it how this piece of machinery was working? We can also say we got better quality of data now because our entries are validated as they go in. We can write little scripts in Python or whatever just to say, like, you know, that number doesn't make sense. But more importantly, what we can do here is that if somebody puts in, if a downtime event occurs and a person doesn't actually, you know, put in the right information or sort of overwrite it that a PLC said that this bit failed and they have to say what the actual reason is, they can see instantly at the end of a shift and say, John, you know, what actually happened there, or how did you fix it? Before, with the old manual way of collecting data, it might be like a month later where a person says, what were these 2 hours for? And they go like, oh, I think it was, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
Other aspects
That makes a huge difference if you're talking about understanding what a downtime event, how it occurred in real time versus months later trying to recall what happened. Not only can you not recall it probably like you're saying there, but also you got a month's worth of error that can be added on top of that before you get any answer.
Exactly. And I mean, when I first came here, we didn't have anything. I started putting data into a spreadsheet, but again, it's entering the data into the same thing I came up, and every now and again you create a pivot table and you try and make some sense of the data that's going in there. The quality of data is important. A lot of times people don't believe the data, and if they don't believe the data, they're not gonna, it's not actionable data. Well, now we've got a system here that is, it's validating, it's verifying the data, and people can actually drive and make intelligent business decisions based on it. The other significant, the other efficiency that we've got here, that I say, is from the fact that we can combine data. As I mentioned before, we might have production data in one spreadsheet, we might have sampling data in another sheet. If you want to do kind of a true analysis and try and figure out what's my process recovery efficiency of specific metal types in terms of what I'm producing and what I'm losing, it would take 3 or 4 hours to combine all the data from all the different spreadsheets or data sources. And then you go to a meeting, you talk about it, you say, let's try this. You change it. A month later, they say, well, did that improve anything? And it's, I'll come back in 3 hours' time after I've redone that. Well, now, that exact exercise that I used to do, I created a screen. It took me about 2 hours in Ignition to whip it, clean it up, how I wanted to format it. It's there. It's done. So now, at any time, anyone throughout the organization can go and do a metals analysis. And that's kind of the thing that I see in terms of, you know, you could call it the gift here, is that things that we used to do in spreadsheets and we'd have to do it again and again and again, I can now do it one time. And it's there for posterity, for everyone to see and use as a tool. But the final one in terms of the efficiencies that we've seen is, yes, it absolutely has reduced downtime. And what's important is the type of downtime. I mean, it was obvious to most of us is that the most significant cause of downtime would be a conveyor belt. We'd rip a conveyor belt, so it would burn out a motor or a gearbox. That could take, 2 hours to 8 hours, depending on the length of the conveyor belt or where it was. Those things, we've actually, with the HMIs and controls and because of process historian, we've really managed to sort of reduce the amount of downtime with conveyor belts. But what we have started to see in the daily meetings is the sort of hidden downtimes that we never really captured. And one that's come up as our number one cause of downtime is an event where we have a magnet, it picks out metal, it comes down a chute and it fills a box. And what we do, we have a forklift operator has to unload that box. Well, they determined that from safety reasons, they should just pause production while that event happens. It only takes him 2 minutes. So no one ever thought anything about it. But we saw straight away that he's doing this 30 times a day. It's an hour of lost production every single day. And until we were actually capturing these small events and seeing them, the only person who knew that amount of downtime was occurring was a forklift operator. So that's really what's given us the ability to significantly increase efficiencies by what we've rolled out.
Thanks, Jason. That's a great answer. And I asked all of our panelists this question. I think you dug into several answers already, but just give you an opportunity to add anything to it before we sort of go into an overall Q&A. But in your opinion, how has Ignition helped pay for itself so far? You said February. You're 10 months into it. How does it seem in terms of the ROI discussion we've been having today?
Yeah, it's, we've gone back. We did a post-mortem as part of this project, and one is, we put in what we believe the ROI is. And we had some conversations, and I don't think there's anybody who can, look at what we've done without sort of smiling on their face to say, seriously, you don't think this has already paid for itself. The actual coming up with a number has been a real challenge, and the reason why it becomes a challenge is anything that's software and IT, it kind of tends to be an intangible. We can create a system that's going to improve something, but if people don't use the information, if people don't use the system, they're not going to derive the benefits of that system. I mean, a lot of software has always been considered as a cost of doing business in terms of, instead of an ROI. But what we do know is that our metal loss has been reduced by 2 points, and that's significant for us for our volumes. So that was one that we could take and say, look, here is a tangible. The other thing that we've seen is that availability has gone up by 3%. Ultimately, I'd say is the fact that everyone in operations has adopted this, is using it, and every other yard in operations wants this and are lining up for us to roll this out is a testament in itself to the perceived value that people see from this system.
Absolutely. Thanks for elaborating on that. I really appreciate the detail went into in terms of just the OEE downtime and SBC modules and the overall ignition platform and how it's playing out across the various organizations, and obviously future plans lining up to be able to get moving too. I want to move, just take a little bit of a review today and then move into some Q&A. We have a bunch of questions in the queue, which I'll get to. A few takeaways from today's webinar. Unlimited licensing saves money, opens new possibilities. Web-based architecture saves time and makes updates easier. Rapid application development cuts project time and inspires innovation. SQL database and ignition together make control data more valuable and increasing production efficiency. Clearly can have an impact on boosting profits. So we're going to move into our Q&A section because I have a number of things in the queue. I do want to mention at the bottom of this call today about our end-of-year training special. I just want to mention it too because many people that are involved in today's webinar have asked us to help them for getting projects moving inside their organizations. A good number of you have quotes outstanding that you're working on, and all we're trying to do is encourage you. Travis, who's our Director of Training and Support, is going to have twice the training facility in the first quarter of next year. We're right in the middle of expanding facilities. On one hand, he loves to have sold-out classes. On the other hand, he doesn't like to put people on hold. He wants to be able to accommodate twice as many students starting in the first quarter. So you have the names of all of our executives, our account executives up there. Jim, Vanessa, Myron, Shane, Raman, Vivian, and Melanie can help you if you're not sure at all. She does all account services for the reps. So please take advantage of calling them if you want to dig in more detail or you want to find out about that sort of year-end double your training value special that we're doing. Ted, I want to start with a question that's directed at you. A lot of people here are new using SQL. Do you have any advice for using Ignition and SQL if you're talking about someone who's just starting out? You're using it in very, very intense ways.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd say a quick way to get started would be to run in parallel with an existing system. Use Ignition to communicate to your field devices, your PLCs. Then query an existing business system to obtain the business data that you want to combine with the PLC data. This will reduce the operator input to your application. You'll need to identify and work closely with a business owner, most likely an operations manager, maybe a process improvement engineer or a quality manager to determine the best way to visualize the data that you're storing for them. And then you're off to the races. Over time, I'm sure your business owners will see the speed that you can expand the scope of your project and grow without additional costs.
Thanks, Ted. I appreciate that. Henry, opening question for you. When your company made the switch to Ignition, how quickly were you able, you and your team there, were you able to pick it up at the water wastewater plant?
Well, my question kind of goes along with the first one. Initially, we had set up a system on the side using the data historian to log data. At that time, it was factory SQL. And I literally had the factory SQL up and logging data within less than 30 minutes. Then we liked the product so much that we looked at the factory PMI, which became the Vision module. And because the cost was so inexpensive, my boss had us do a 60-day evaluation, during which time we took and we set up all of the pump station screens, and I made it do all of the more detailed queries that we would need to do. And the software really, came through and shined after the 60-day startup. So 30 minutes on one half and a 60-day trial on the other, and we were good to go. And then once the Ignition came out, that was really a nice polishing of the two software components, and so we hopped on Ignition right away, and we've just continued on from there.
Thanks, Henry. Appreciate that. Tom, here's a couple questions I'm going to throw your direction because they're about OEE and SPC, the modules. So I'll read them both. OEE does Ignition actually calculate the OEE? as a percentage, or does it just provide the metrics, figures to put into your own OEE calculation? And the second question is, does the SPC module calculate and produce CPK and PPK charts? So there's question 1, question 2.
Okay. Yes, OEE module calculates the percentage. So it's monitoring the downtime events, recording the downtime events and such. And then it also tracks your production information and calculates the actual percentages. That being said, it's flexible and you can change what the OEE calculations are. The second question there, yes, the SPC module does produce process capability and process performance charts.
Okay, cool. Just one thing on the overall investment in MES software. Is there a way to test to see if a large investment in MES software would be wise? Obviously, there are some questions about its functionality, but how do you suggest going about making that basic evaluation, Tom?
Yeah, you know, it's a little bit cart before the horse. How do you do a return on investment when you don't really know what your returns are going to be? One way to handle that is to do a pilot. Put it into one area of the plant, put it into one facility, see what your returns are, and then you can justify expanding it from there.
Cool, thanks. Jason, a question for you on, you moved pretty fast. You mentioned getting rolling around February. So how has the technical support of inductive automation been of help to you in this speed of getting up and running with Ignition?
It's been one of the real drives, actually, that got us going with this platform. Again, when we started in February, but before that we did an evaluation of several different vendor packages. And I watched the QC video that you have on your website. From there it said try, you know, a demo. I downloaded the demo. I then contacted IT, and within 13 minutes of contacting them, they had OPC going through DCOM, connecting to OPC servers, which was something I had failed to do with other companies. And I was looking at OPC bridge connectors and other third-party software and device drivers. And this was at a time when I was trying to connect the PLC to an OPC server on a system. And it was again, this is getting ugly, because now I've got a third-party piece of software that's got to sit on a PC box here, then I've got the PLC here, and I've got this embedded Windows PC that's sitting on the piece of equipment itself. So I was blown away by the technical support, because these are guys that, you know, they're not just technical support, they're developers, they know the software. And it actually goes back to, I think, the question a person asked about how are you going to, what's a good way to get up to speed with SQL? Well, the guys in technical support were going to help you there. Plus, you know, you add to that, when we did this project, we used Inductive's design services led by Kevin McCluskey. And you've got stars on there, so they were very able to, and very quickly, to help us out with the SQL and give us some kind of training there and then. So technical support, I got to say, has been fantastic. And really what it does in terms of using this application is that it's reduced the amount of people we need on our staff here to support our system. Because of the platform, as you say, it's Java development. I don't need to create install packages. I don't need to test it on different Windows or other operating systems. I don't have to create deployment packages. But also, I don't need to have that guru expert of interoperability or sort of COM, DCOM sitting here in the company. I can rely on Ignition for the experts, and they can help us with our development or aspects of development as we need to, you know, consume more data sources and push this out to other applications.
Yeah, Jason, I think I would really compliment you and your organization for, I think, appropriately using Kevin McCluskey as a director of our design services and his design team, because really what he's trying to do is just provide sort of a expertise that is what he calls a project accelerator function. So you get a project moving, you get the exact right design support and help you need, so you don't have to have all that expertise on your team. And it's really been effective, both for integrators and end users alike, to use that sort of project accelerator function as it makes sense. If you don't need it, you don't use it, but if you need something to move and move fast, that's what Kevin McCluskey and Design Services was developed to accomplish. So thanks for those comments on that, Jason. Tom, another question for you here. This is from Kathy. Not sure if it's hardware or software question, but but what kind of redundancy or how is high availability accomplished so that there is no loss of view or control?
Yeah, we have a redundant setup that you can set up where you have a master and you have a backup. And all the view, the control, the logging, everything is redundant. And the state is communicated between those two systems. So if one goes down, the other one picks up. All the clients switch over and connect to the backup one.
Good, thanks. Just as we sort of wind down here, I'm going to give each of our panelists a chance to sort of answer a final question, and we just have a couple, few minutes left, but I want to give you a chance to finally comment anything. The goal we had here was really to give our attendees an opportunity to get some perspective they may use, maybe in terms of understanding it better themselves, but in many cases it was also to communicate it inside their organizations. Just one question from David Anderson. I'll answer here. How long has Ignition been in the market? Inductive automation, I mentioned, is 10 years. Ignition is in its 2.5 months, going on just about 3 years since it came out. So that's the answer to that. We had some legacy products that Henry Palecek was referred to, Factory PMI and Factory SQL, which were unified about 3 years ago in the Ignition platform. Final question to all of you. I'll start, I guess, with you, Ted, and then just go down the line. Is based on your experience, what recommendation would you give to someone who has to come up with an ROI justification for Ignition, either for themselves or for people inside their organization? And Tom, I'll probably skip you on that particular question, and I'm just going to go with the folks who are sort of end-user type that might be able to throw something up, so shed some light on that. But I'll give you anything you want to say, and finally, is where we wrap up and go to these final questions. If not, that's okay.
No, I think just in general, every business is a little bit different, and you have to take a look at what's important to your business and look for the greatest areas of return and work on those first, and then go down from there, and you can continue on for continuous improvement on items that aren't as great. But start with the greatest ones, get the biggest bang for your buck.
Great. Thanks, Tom, and thanks for participating in the discussion today. Ted Grimace, you asked the question. Based on your experience, what recommendations would you give someone who's looking for an ROI justification for Ignition?
Sure. Well, clearly Ignition is your one of the lower cost IT solutions for you. I mean, that addresses your IT costs. On the cost benefits equation, the other aspect is it the right thing to do? And a lot of the questions here came around. I'd say that you'll most likely need Ignition just to gather the metrics to show your project improvement. I mean, I've seen just giving visibility to operators of key performance metrics will help your production lines. Something as simple as displaying real-time set points and upper and lower limits and a trend line of current behavior will help operators see. Given the operator that kind of visibility, will say, hey, I'm about to hit my upper limit. Maybe I need to make an adjustment here. So that's one option. A small win would be go out to your factory and replace one of your small antiquated HMIs with the standalone version of Ignition. You'll be able to introduce some new components to it. You won't have the database connectivity to go on that path, but that's one way to get a small win right off the bat with Ignition.
Thanks, Ted. Henry, I won't repeat the question, but the same question to you in terms of ROI justification.
So I agree that Ignition is the lowest cost, most powerful SCADA solution on the market right now. We had actually looked for a couple of years as to what we were going to do. And what kind of drove it for us was the need for reliable long-term data storage. And so we found that in the SQL bridging module. The cost of the SCADA software was probably a secondary consideration. The software costs less than a typical support contract. And then we no longer needed to do that third-party outside programmer. And so that yielded us a savings of $30,000. We're also doing the panel vision at our larger pump stations to display the data for the operators in a local configuration. So there's good flexibility there. And we also did use a little bit of our IT staff and some design services from you guys. And the phased approach really made it all kind of come together in a nice package for our water district.
Thanks, Henry. Appreciate it. And Jason, is there final question then over to you in terms of recommendations you might give someone for ROI justification for Ignition in their organization.
Certainly. And as I mentioned before, we found that, actually figuring out how much or what the ROI was has been a bit of a challenge. But when we actually moved ahead and we put this in as a project charter proposal, we knew if we knew how much potential there was there, what we did was show and say, you only have to move the needle by so much for there to be a recovery. So we said, even if we only improve recovery by 0.1%, this will pay for itself within 6 months, because the cost of what we're actually doing is so low. And that, when we showed it in that way, it's kind of easy to see that, yes, it's definitely a worthwhile project. What I will say here is that you'll probably find that the ROI that you get from a project isn't necessarily from the areas that you actually implemented, but from other things. That this platform is so flexible, it's allowed us to do many things. And one of the examples I can give of that is because it's got a great data connectivity to other disparate data sources. As we were doing this project, we said, hey, I tell you what, give us a feed of parts data and work order history that's in our ERP or our EAM system. Getting that, not a significant thing, but now it means that when a piece of equipment goes down, the guy can go to the HMI, he can click on that piece of equipment, he can see the parts list, parts description, part number, on-hand inventory, and where it's located. And I've always said, okay, this is, that took like 20 minutes to completely implement and create that screen and data connected to it. It's probably the single most thing that the people rave about, because prior to that, they didn't have access. They didn't know where the parts were. If there wasn't a warehouse person in there, they couldn't ask. If there wasn't an EAM administrator, they couldn't get it. So they might spend 2 hours wandering around looking for a part that they didn't even know existed. And you add to that that they can also, at the same screen, on that same piece of equipment, click on it and see the work order history. How many times has that gearbox that we're about to replace just been replaced in the last month? And was it replaced last night by night shift? It gave information or data to the people who need it, who turn it into actionable information. So you're going to find that there's going to be whole avenues of ROI that you didn't even consider. But what the Ignition is doing is it's giving you a tool to be able to do these things, whereas we've never had a tool before. And what I will say is that when you are going through, the proposals or looking at the ROI here, one of the things that you may run into is, and we certainly did, is that people are looking at us in disbelief. I've been accused that my costs are unrealistic, and I'm saying, no, really, I can implement it for this cost. And then I'm told, no, your timelines are unrealistic. I'm going, no, really, I can actually do it in this amount of time. And this is because we're dealing with a system that allows us to be incredibly productive, incredibly agile, compared to the more traditional software packages and vendors that are more expensive. It takes more to actually get them implemented and working. So you might add that's the sixth gift that Ignition gives you. It's the priceless look on people's faces when you tell them that you can do it for this price and in this time.
Actually, I think we will add that to the extra gift. That's the final gift for the holiday season, Jason. And actually, I want to thank you, Ted Krebitz, Henry Palecek, Jason Koop, Tom Heckman. I really know that all of you are very busy, and I think it was really well worth it, just by the fact that I can see that our audience stayed with us the whole time. Well worth it that you were willing to take some time out of your busy schedules to share. So with that, I want to thank all of our panelists again. I want to wish you and all of our audience a great holiday season, and we look forward to working with you through the rest of this year and into 2013. Thanks a lot for attending. That ends today's webinar.